Good evening. I'm John Daly. This is People to be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. Tonight, you've got two leaders in supplying more green electric power to Westchester. Nina Orville, Director of Solar Programs for Sustainable Westchester. Nina Orville leads Sustainable Westchester's solar programs, including community solar and commercial solar acceleration. She directed the Solarize Westchester program with rooftop solar campaigns in partnership with 22 municipalities. And she, as founding executive director of Southern Westchester Energy Action Consortium, Nina contributed to the formation of Sustainable Westchester, leading Westchester into the green electricity future. Dan Welch was a core team member with Sustainable Westchester since 2009. Since September 2016, Dan has oversees business operations and program development for Westchester Power, New York State's first community choice aggregation program, acronym CCA. Dan previously worked for Chemtext Engineering, building their local presence in China, overseeing marketing and contracts for the plant construction there in the Orient. And to begin with, you are here because Sustainable Westchester contacted its customers with an even lower 100% green power rate than a year ago. People should have gotten that mailing by now, and it is 7.405 cents per kilowatt hour. How has that been achieved, Dan?
So yeah, thanks. First of all, just thanks for inviting us back on and for People to be Heard's continued interest in this subject. It's a little nerdy at times, so it's nice to have a community program willing to dive into the weeds on something like this, but it is so important. So a lot of thanks there. In terms of the latest offering, we're really excited about it. It is the result of our first utilization of a reverse auction platform to bring bidders to the competitive field and drive as much price reduction as possible. It was a really fun exercise. We had 5 bidders ultimately pre-qualify, come in, and then you sit there for 15 minutes and they're jogging the price down. And by the end of the time, the differences in each bid were like in the hundredths of a cent. So we know that we squeezed as much out of the market as we could this time, and it did result in a nice little reduction in that rate.
Ms. Orville, how is this possible that you folks are lowering the rate while Con Eds are going up? Well, they never go down.
This relates again to the Westchester Power Program that Dan runs, and the team there has just done a terrific job making sure that the bidding process for supplying electricity to the Westchester Power customers was very transparent and very competitive. So we're really pleased that they managed to lock in that lower rate for the
we should note the Con Ed increases that are seemingly fairly relentless. A lot of those are driven by all the distribution costs. They're constantly going back to the state to say, we need an increase to, be able to maintain the system and, refurbish the equipment and things like that. It's kind of, another sector of the cost, but it does add to the burden of the ratepayer for sure.
Do they raise their direct costs in proportion to losses they're suffering in the electricity supply?
I don't believe there's really a loss for them there. I think it's primarily in the costs for maintaining the system. As far as their involvement in the supply side, they've always, since the late 90s, since deregulation, and it's worth kind of revisiting this and remembering that, you have supply, and then it's kind of the infrastructure is distribution and transmission. On the supply side, since deregulation, they've kind of been essentially out of the business in terms of it being a business for them. They do supply, they're the supplier of last resort, but it's just a pass through. Whatever the market is on that day, it comes through, and they have a little administration fee. So as far as we know, they don't have a stake in who the ultimate supplier is in terms of their bottom line.
Right. Ms. Orville, how has the Westchester Power Consortium of 24 towns and communities grown?
Well, I don't want to steal Dan's thunder. So Dan, why don't you share the good news about the Westchester Power program?
Well, yeah, it's we are continuing to work with all the communities that have not yet joined on. And since we met, we're up to 27 communities. And in fact, what's really fun is just yesterday, we got approval from the Public Service Commission to add a new community. So the village of Tuckahoe has been approved to join. There's still some work to be done around contracts and things like that, and the whole onboarding process with the notification letters. But the big step of getting them approved has happened. So we could be up to 28 before you know it. And the big discussion we're having and most excited about is Yonkers, and that would be a huge addition to the aggregation. And we've been talking to them for some years now. And you can imagine big city, it just takes a lot more work. We've actually been doing a lot of outreach there, meeting people in the community. We were in a big Spanish language event, but there is a process. They're going to be looking. In fact, there's a meeting this afternoon about the local law that has to pass. But that's an exciting potential additional member that we can look forward to maybe next year by the time they come in.
And
but with go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's important to note with the 27 municipalities that have been participating in the program, every one of them recently renewed their participation in the program. So we're really pleased that there has been zero attrition, as well as the continued growth in participation by municipalities.
Right, and I will say there is a relationship to Nina's solar side of things, in as much as, and I don't want to steal Nina's thunder, but we're looking at a developments next year which bring the programs kind of together and are contingent on being in the CCA. So we can talk more about that, but that is one of the attractive things for the communities in terms of what's coming down the pike.
So Ms. Orville, how has solar grown under your stewardship?
Well, solar throughout New York State is really booming. So the state has set a target for the amount of installed solar to triple by 2025. And up to 6 gigawatts. And we're seeing a lot of acceleration here in Westchester County with the solar developers that we're working with. Very robust projects in the pipeline.
Are these mainly homes installing solar panels, or communities using their properties to set up solar panels on top and increasing the capacity? Which is more, which is less?
That's a great question. So there continues to be a lot of adoption of residential solar for sure. And anybody who is a homeowner and has a good roof for solar and intends to spend a little while in their home, it's a wonderful investment. And so that's a great thing. A lot of the growth that we're seeing, however, is coming from larger scale solar installations of the nature that you're talking about. So on municipal property, on commercial property, et cetera.
Yes, now I know White Plains has identified some spots. How are they doing on actually building on them?
So my understanding is that work is proceeding very nicely. I don't know exactly what the timeline is in White Plains for construction of those projects, but I know that it is moving along. They're working with the New York Power Authority on that project.
But no idea exactly when they'll complete that.
I'm not familiar with the specific timeline.
How long does it usually take to put together a commercial run facilities like that? How long does it usually take? Because there's much bigger installations than a house.
Yes,
right?
that's for sure. Yeah. So there are multiple steps to the process, as you can imagine, ranging from the engineering required, procuring a company to actually do the construction, getting permits from the relevant jurisdictions, working with the utility to ensure that the utility can handle
They plug in.
Energy produced. Exactly. And then finally doing the construction. So the construction is actually often the fastest element of the work, believe it or not. So it might look like nothing is happening, and then suddenly, within a period of a few weeks, a project can be fully constructed.
Yeah. How is that usually handled? Is it paid for by the state, or does the municipality have to pay for it?
So if you're talking specifically about how solar development is happening on municipal property, I'm happy to share a little bit about something called community solar, because that's the way that larger scale solar development is really happening in our region. And
I see. How does that work? Since we're going to get to that later, but that it is very important to do it now because it's coming up.
Wonderful. So what distinguishes community solar from traditional solar development is that solar companies typically will build and own solar facilities located in places that are optimal for solar. It can be on large rooftops, it can be on closed landfills, it can even be solar parking canopies on parking lots. And those companies will pay a lease payment to the owner of the property. And all of the electricity that's generated from those solar installations goes back to the electricity grid. So in our case, it goes back to Con Ed, for instance. And then individuals can sign up to subscribe as subscribers to specific community solar projects that are in their area. And it gives them the opportunity actually to benefit from financial savings up to 10% of their entire electricity bill, while directly supporting new solar energy production in the region. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, and that means the consumer does not have to install it on their own roof, right?
That's exactly right. And one of the things actually that's most important about that is traditional solar installations have excluded so many people from solar benefits. So anyone, for instance, who is a renter was unable to benefit from solar energy. Anybody who lived in multifamily housing, or who had a shaded roof, or whose finances weren't in a state that made solar on their home possible, they were all excluded. So what's very exciting about community solar is that it opens the door for almost everybody to benefit.
Yes, and all this is developed over about 5-6 years now.
That's right.
That's an amazing progress considering we were nowhere with it 6 years ago.
That's correct. Yes. And really it's only been, I would say, in the last year or two that there's really been the opportunity for people to begin to participate in community solar. So it's actually very recent, and we've been really happy at Sustainable Westchester to champion that here in Westchester County.
It's a
Now,
big piece of the state energy plan for sure.
yes. Now, Con Edison is trying to compete with your lower green rate by offering renewable options by mail, etc. Is this an indication that Con Ed is feeling loss of customers to you?
So we've heard customers make the same remarks to us, but in fact, on examination, I think you'll find those notices, if they're the ones I'm thinking of, are referrals to a message that Con Ed puts out, which is directing people to the opportunity to purchase green power from ESCO services. Because Con Ed themselves do not supply a green product. That's, again, just in the nature of their role in this whole, electricity ecosystem. They're strictly, last resort, whatever comes off the grid. But they do, as part of their role in outreach and whatnot, they send out these messages for different programming things. And the sort of ability for people to secure a green product on the market is, part of the total state strategy, and they do issue these letters. We only wish that the letter also pointed out that, by the way, for municipalities in any of these 27 municipalities, residents can also secure it through the aggregation. So it's a little disconnect there. But
why don't they do that? Why don't they do that? Good question. So at this point, Con Ed is getting out of the energy production business.
I think so, but let's, to be sure, they're still really important partners and pieces of the puzzle, because getting to where we want to get to on the renewable energy, which is essentially 100% clean grid, right? Get rid of the fossil fuels, requires a lot of upgrades on the grid. It requires, we just talked about the challenges in making the connections, whether the circuits are going to accommodate or not. So there's a lot of upgrades there. There is strategic placement of storage in different places in the grids to help with that. They're also our partner, for example, at least indirectly, on various cutting edge programming that we're doing. We had this wonderful pilot of something we call grid rewards, but it's a demand response program. And we did this last summer. It's we work with one technology supplier. There's an app, you sign up, and then during a couple of peak hour periods, so like 4 hour, 5 hour slots during the peaks of the summer, if you reduce your usage at that time, you can make money. And people in the pilot made anywhere from $50 to $300 for just taking those actions during those periods. That depends on Con Ed, because there's this big data flow that goes back and forth, So they're partners in trying to get this done, but they are not actual suppliers in the same sense as the generators and the ESCOs that we work with.
Now, your new kilowatt rate is based on consumption from the previous year. And has electric consumption decreased in the last year?
Nina, you also have signals on this, I know.
Yeah, so what we're seeing in the work that we're doing in the solar arena, where we look at people's historical energy consumption and we compare current to historical usage, is that residential usage is a little bit up. And that's really what we would expect in this time of COVID. We're all, those of us who are lucky enough to be able to be in our homes during these challenging days, we're using more electricity in our homes and not necessarily going into the offices or the commercial workplaces that we would have otherwise been. So yes. I'm seeing a bit of an increase in residential usage.
Yeah, and
Netflix, right?
That's right.
A lot of Netflix, a lot of bad movies that shouldn't have been made. But be that as it may, so consumer consumption is up. However, what about business consumption? That should be down, is it not?
Yeah, so I think we see a bit of reduction. I think, our in the aggregation in the Westchester Power program, we have the so-called small consumers. These are, you know, mom and pop size businesses, and they've been hit. So that's down. And we do know that for certainly for the large commercial and industrial, it's been an issue as well. So probably if you look at the overall picture, that's where the reduction is coming from the commercial side.
Mm-hmm. Now, has green energy resources increased power on the power grid?
Well, there's certainly been an increase in the amount of green energy, and you know, through work
wind, solar, and whatever. Yeah.
Doing, yeah. Now it depends on where you are on the grid a little bit. To some extent, there's you know, trying to move that power around. But I'd say if you look back at the, you know, the new kilowatt hours, the new megawatt hours that have gone onto the grid over the past couple of years, I'm going to say that the great majority of it is in the renewable area. So you're not
how much? A
you're
third?
not seeing, you know, new big you know, non-renewable plants go online these days.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Indian Point, you know, is shutting down, so that takes off some of the nuclear supply as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, do we have a
John? Yes, with regard to your question about percentage, we know that in New York State, the percentage of electricity from renewable sources is a little under 30% currently. Now, New York State law, as per the law that was adopted last year, requires the percentage of renewable electricity to be 70% by 2030. So
by 2030,
we are looking at an extraordinary transformation that has to happen in terms of
So how much more do we have to go? How much more do we have to go? Are we at a third? Or,
well, we're at about 30%, and we need 30%. To get to 70%. So
more than double what we have. Yeah, it's
more than double
gigawatts.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think that can be done in 9 years? Can it be done in 9 years?
It's very aggressive. It requires action at every level, the state level, local governments, industry, the utilities, residents stepping up and saying that they want renewable electricity. The New York State, the climate law, and the work that the state is doing now to map out how to achieve what's required is really at the forefront in the United States.
Are they going to aggregate who's going to get the assignments?
Who's going to get
I think the state plan is going to look at that total that we've got to reach, and then they're going to say, hey, we expect, you know, a couple of gigawatts out of the community solar program. We've got, you know, they have even larger scale facilities which are outside of the community solar area, which are, you know, a utility scale. So they've got X amount they expect, out of that. Yeah. And then other miscellaneous additions. So they know where they want it to come from, and their policy moves are geared to trying to drive that.
Is it moving as fast as can be expected?
I can tell you it's moving very quickly. Mm-hmm. So as to whether we can get exactly where we're currently required to be by that year, we'll have to see as time moves on. But it has been quite remarkable from my perspective as someone who's worked in the solar industry for a number of years, to see how the solar development has accelerated beyond what I could have imagined a couple of years ago. So I'm very optimistic.
And that's where community solar comes in speeding up the process. The communities participating. Correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Piece. Nina's working with all the municipalities to try and get their collaboration, working with community groups. And how many megawatts have you put on with the program up to now, Nina? I mean, it's already like
20 megawatts
yeah, I mean,
or so, with a lot more that is in the pipeline that we're working on enrolling people in. And as Dan mentioned, we're working with a lot of municipalities across Westchester. So John, you referenced the work that the city of White Plains is doing in developing solar on their own facilities. There's a larger effort that Sustainable Westchester is doing in partnership with Westchester County and the New York Power Authority. It's called the Westchester Community Solar Partnership. And it's designed to make it easy for other municipalities and school districts essentially to do just what the city of White Plains has done. So
yes,
we have about 35 municipalities and school districts that have signed up to say that they want their rooftops and their parking lots analyzed as potential locations for community solar.
So you got 35 new potential places to put solar installations.
It's actually, and in terms of the number of specific sites that have been put forward, it's close to 200 sites
Wow,
that have been recommended by those 35 entities, those 35 governments, and
that's breaking news.
It's exciting. It's exciting. So
it's very rare a weekly show can break news. I haven't even heard of that in what constitutes the print press today.
You will be hearing much more about it in the near future, but we're so happy to come and share that information with you that work is underway.
Wow. I mean, this is really good. That's why we do this sort of stuff, because things need to be heard that haven't been said.
And what I would love to see is, anyone who has relationships with some of the big property owners in the county, these, big malls, parking lots, like they're all fair game, and there's money to be made, and there's, a big contribution that can be made to the greening of the grid. And so I hope they hear the work that Nina's doing here and ask about the opportunities to be a host for these systems.
Yes.
Are there any numbers you want to mention to call? Telephone numbers. I'm a CEO sitting at home watching this program, and you should pick up the phone and call Murray Hill 75000.
They can send us an email. That might be the easiest way these days, at communitysolar@sustainablewestchester.org.
Now, getting back to the nuts and bolts for the consumer, the homeowner, can you explain standard supply and green supply that you offer?
Right. Well, obviously the program is very focused on the green supply. We offer the standard supply because we feel there's still can be a value for those folks who really want to squeeze the last couple of what we call mils or tenths of a cent out of the price. We do have that as an option. But the green supply is 100% New York State hydropower. So it's clean, it's green, it generates New York State taxes because it's in-state resources. And it's fun because if you look at these facilities, I always like to, when we go to the towns for meetings, I like to bring a picture of the facilities because they tend to be in really beautiful areas, up in the Adirondacks or wherever. And so it really conveys that image of clean, on top of being sort of virtually clean in terms of the electric power. So it's all clean power.
What is the percentage of residential customers and commercial customers taking the green supply option?
At this point in the Con Ed zone, it's almost everybody. It's like about 95%. Are in the green supply now, so we're really gratified about that. The municipalities have put their flag in the ground about what they stand for, and the residents have been very supportive as well. So it's really an amazing thing.
Nina Orville, Director of Solar Programs for Sustainable Westchester, and Dan Welch, Director of Westchester Power. You have been heard. Thank you very much for being on the program, And this is John Daly saying good night for people to be heard.